Very good morning, dear children. Dear children, we are going to start with the next topic of our chapter, that is the sword of Tipu Sultan and wood steel. Now, children, we will begin the story of the Indian iron and steel uh, metallurgy by just going through the famous story of Tipu Sultan. And children, we have already read about Tipu Sultan. He ruled Mysore till 1799, and he fought four wars with the British, and he died he died fighting with the sword in his hand. So, what was so special about his sword? His legendary sword, children, it is now kept in the valuable collections at the museum in England. So, there was something special with the sword. That's why it is kept in the museum at England. So, children, why it was so special? Because children, it was very hard. The first thing is it was very hard, and the second thing is it has a very sharp edge which can even cut off the armors of the soldier. So you all know that the armor, why the soldiers wear armor? Just to protect themselves. Fine, so that is made up of iron, and this sword of Tipu Sultan even can could cut the armor of the opponent. So it was so hard, and it was so it was having a sharp edge. Fine. Now the quality of the sword, children, why it was special? It was made up of very special type of hard carbon steel, and that is known as woods, which was produced all over South India at that time. Fine. Wood steel, children, when made into sword, it used to produce a very sharp edge. When the wood steel was used in making a sword, it was having a very sharp edge. Fine. Now the pattern, it was having a water pattern, flowing water pattern. Fine. And this pattern, how could it was made? It was made up of carbon crystals which were just embedded in that iron. Fine. So this way the sword was made. The next thing is Francis Buchman, children. When he came to Mysore, when he toured Mysore in 1800, a year after Tipu Sultan's death, children, and has left us as an account of technique by which wood steel was produced in many hundreds of smelting furnaces in Mysore. Now, that time, this wood steel was made in many hundred places. There were so many places of smelting furnaces. Smelting means the process of obtaining a metal from a rock by heating it on a high temperature. Fine. Melting the object made from metal in order to use the metal to make something new. Melting the metal and to make something new. Fine. So he found so many smelting furnaces there. Now in these furnaces you can call them a gas stove. Fine. So iron was mixed with charcoal, and then after that it was put inside a small clay pots, and by this they used to control the temperature, and after that the smelters used to produce steel ingots. You can call them small crystal or cubes of the steel that were used by sword making, not just in India but in this technology, children. It was not only used in India but also in West and Central Asia too. Fine. Now, children, wood was an anglicized version of the Kannada word ukku, Telugu word hukku, and Tamil Malayalam Urukku. Fine. So, what does these words mean? They mean steel. So, woods mean steel. Fine. Now, Indian wood steel, it attracted the European scientists. So, Michael Faraday, you know about Michael Faraday? He was the one who discovered electricity and electromagnetism. He spent 4 years on studying the properties of Indian woods. Fine, from 1818 to 1822, he spent these 4 years just to study the properties of Indian woods. The wood steel children making process, which was so widely known in South India that time, it was completely lost. It was just vanished in the mid 19th century. Fine. Now, why it was so? Why it lost, children? Because the swords and the armor making industries, they died with the conquest of India by the British, and now the import of iron and steel was done from England, and it was displaced from the you know uh, iron and steel produced by the craft people in India. So this was the reason. Fine. Now after that, children, abandoned furnaces in villages. Fine. Now, for the production of wood steel, it required a highly specialized technique of refining iron. So in order to make this wood steel, a highly specialized technique was required. Fine. Now, but iron smelting in India was extremely common till the end of the 19th century. Just now we have discussed that till the end of the 19th century it was very common. Now, in Bihar and central India, in particular, every district had smelters that used local deposits of ore to produce iron, which was widely used for the manufacture of implements and tools of our daily use. So, in these areas, Bihar and central India, there the smelters, they were using the local deposits of the ore just to make the implements and tools for the daily use. The furnaces were most often built of clay. So the stoves, you can say, so they were made up of clay. And after that, sun dried bricks, they used clay as well as sun dried bricks. Now the smelting was done by men. Who was doing the smelting work? Men. While women, they used to work in bellows. Now what is bellow? Bellow is a device or equipment that pump air. You might have seen in the movies also. There is a sort of fan like that is just used to pump the air in that furnace. Fine. So pumping air to keep the charcoal burning, that work was done by the women. Fine. By the late 19th century, however, the craft of iron smelting was in decline. You all know it was at decline. But in most villages, furnaces fell into disuse, and obviously the furnaces was not used now, and the amount of iron produced came down. Obviously, the amount of iron which was producing, that also came down. Why it was so? Why this happened? The one reason was the new forest law. The reason was new forest laws were made. Now, when the colonial government, they used to prevent the people from entering the reserved forest. When they were stopping them, how could the iron smelters, they could find wood for charcoal, and how could they get iron ore? So, defying foreign laws, they often entered the forest secretly and collected woods. They used to go secretly. Fine. Then, but they could not sustain their occupation on this basis for long. But they can't go again and again like this, na. So they cannot, continue with the same profession. So many gave up their craft and looked for the other means of livelihoods, just as weavers, same as weavers. Now these people also, they gave up this occupation, and they started looking for something else to earn their livelihood. In some areas, the government did not grant access to the forest. Just now I told you they were not having any access to the forest, but the iron smelters had to pay a very high tax to the forest department for every furnace they used. This reduced their income. Now they had to pay high taxes to the forest department for every furnace they were using, for every gas stove they were using. So that obviously reduced their income because they had to pay high taxes. Now, moreover, what happened is the late 19th century, iron and steel was being imported from Britain. Now, they started importing iron and steel from Britain. Ironsmiths in India began using imported iron. Now, the ironsmiths in India, they started using Britain imported iron to manufacture utensils and implements. This inevitably lowered the demand of iron produced in local smelters. So it reduced the demand. People are using from the outer side, so the local demand was reduced. By the early 20th century, the artisans producing iron and steel faced new competition. Now they face something new. Now what was that? Iron and steel factories came up in India. Now how could the iron and steel factories come up in India? That we will go to study. The year was 1904 when it started. In the hot month of April, Charles Weld, an American geologist, and Darobhai Darobji Tata, the eldest son of Jamshedji Tata, were traveling in Chhattisgarh. They were going to, Chhattisgarh in search of iron deposits, iron ore deposits, and they spent many months in doing so on this costly venture. What they were looking for? They were looking for the sources of good iron ore. They wanted to set up a venture. Fine, they wanted to set up a modern iron and steel plant in India. Jamshedji Tata, he had decided to spend a large part of his fortune, his money, wealth. He wanted to establish a big iron and steel industry in India. But children, this could only be possible when they will get something, a very fine quality iron ore. So they need this source, so they were just searching out for that. One day, when they were traveling for many hours in the forest, Weld and Darobji came upon a small village and found a group of women and men carrying basket loads of iron ore. Now they found men and women. They were carrying the basket full of this iron ore. These peoples were the Agarias. So these were the Agarias people. When they asked from them that from where they found the iron ore, the Agarias pointed towards the hill, which was at a distance from there. Now these people, they reached the hill. After that, they saw through the dense forest. They reached the hill, and when they explored the hill, the geologists declared that they had at last found what they have been looking for. Rajahara Hills had one of the finest ores in the world. So ultimately, they reached that hill, and that Rajahara Hills, it was having the finest. But the problem was, children, the region was very dry and no water was there. Fine. So water is, it is very much required for the running of factory, and was not to be found nearby, and water was even not nearby. So the Tatas, they continued their search for more suitable place to set up their factory. So even they said, okay, let's search for something else. However, the Agarias the Agaria people, they helped them in the discovery for the source of iron ore that would later supply the Bhilai steel plant. So afterwards also these helped them out. A few years later, what happened? A large area of forest was cleared on the banks of river Subarnarekha just to set up a factory, fine, and industrial township that is in Jamshedpur. Here there was water near iron ore deposit. The Tata Iron and Steel Company, that is TISCO, it came up, began producing steel in 1912. So it was set up at an opportune time. Now, all through the late 19th century, India was importing steel that was manufactured in Britain. Now they wanted expansion of railways in India, the Britishers. Now they required huge, now it gave up a huge market for rails that Britain produced. Fine. For a long while, British experts of the Indian railways were unwillingly to believe that good quality steel could be produced in India. So they were not, trusting India. They were saying that good quality steel could not be produced in India. By the time TISCO was set up, the situation was changing, and TISCO was changing the situation in 1914 when the First World War broke out. Same happened with the textile industry. Same is happening here now. When the First World War broke out, steel produced in Britain now had to meet the demands of war in Europe also. So now the imports were not possible. It declined. So Indian railways, they turned toward TISCO to supply for the supply of rails. They wanted this iron and steel for the laydown of railway tracks. So, as the war dragged for several years, TISCO had to produce shells, carriage wheels, etc. And till then, by 1919, the colonial government was buying 90% of the steel manufactured by TISCO. Now, this they had to buy from the TISCO only. Fine, and became the biggest steel industry within the British Empire. So this was the biggest steel industry, TISCO. Fine. In the case of iron and steel, as in the case of cotton textile, industrial expansion occurred only when British imports to India declined and the market for Indian industrialized goods increased. So you all have seen, just because of war this happened. And what was the ultimate thing? Until and unless the import could not stop from Britain, till then our industries could not have developed. So this happened during the First World War, and even after that. So during the First World War and even after that it happened, they were not getting supplies. So that's why. And moreover, there was a nationalist movement, children, developed, and industrial class became stronger. So during the national movement was there. So this industrial class, it became stronger. The demand for government protection became louder. Now people, they started demanding for the protection. Struggling to retain its control over India, the British government had to concede many of these demands in the last decades of the colonial rule. Now if the government wanted to continue with that, they had to listen to the demands of the people. So they had to agree on some of the demands which the people, or which the industrialists were asking to them. So children, this was the end of the chapter. Just go through the elsewhere early years of industrialization in Japan. Just go through that. Okay, thank you and have a nice day.